and thank you all for being here. We're going to get right to it. My name is Adrian Harewood from CBC Ottawa News at 6, and this is... And we're both really honored. Can you hear me? You can't hear me? You can't hear Sarah? Okay.
Hello?
No? Okay, Sarah, you want to use this?
No, I don't know. There we go. I wasn't pressing hard enough. 89.1 FM.
And we're both honored to be serving as your moderators for this evening. I just wanted to briefly go over the format for tonight. So the candidates participating in the debate will make brief opening statements of 2 minutes each. In responding to a question, each candidate will have 1 minute. Then the candidates will have the opportunity, if we allow it, to debate the issue. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, sir.
Oh, there we go. That's why we can't speak at the same time. Awesome. Bon, OK. Bon, rapidement, chaque candidat aura 2 minutes, disposera de 2 minutes pour faire une déclaration d'ouverture et ils disposeront ensuite d'1 minute pour répondre à une question posée par les modérateurs.
We've determined the order of speakers by alphabetical order. So the first speaker is Abdul Abdi, the Conservative Party candidate for Ottawa West Nepean. Mr. Abdi.
Hello, good evening. Everybody hear me good? Perfect, thank you. Hello, I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you very much for organizing this event. And thank you to the community members who are here, along with our fellow candidates around the table, along with the moderators. My name is Abdul Abdi. I'm the Conservative Party candidate for Ottawa West Nepean. I'm very happy to be here today. Quickly about my background. I've been in this city for the last 30 years, and for the last 15 years, I've been a police officer here in Ottawa, and I've been involved in the community in many capacities during my time as a police officer. Prior to joining the police service, I was a youth worker at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Ottawa, which is located in Ottawa West Nepean, and that's where I worked with many community members, newcomers to Canada, young people. I was a basketball coach. I was a leadership development coordinator. For 2 years, I was also a provincial youth advisor to Boys and Girls Clubs of Ontario across the province. During my time at the police service, I spent 2 years working with RCMP National Security, traveling across the country and keeping our community safe. I've also been avidly involved in the community by way of charity work. Since the mid-90s, I've been involved in United Way Ottawa, where I was sitting on the Ottawa United Way board for the last 5 years, assisting with charity work. Of course, taken time away from that in order to do this. Further, I just also want to make it clear for the record that I've also taken an unpaid leave of absence from the Ottawa Police Service in order for me to run in this election. I am running because I believe in affordability. We want to make this community more affordable. There's a lot of people who are struggling, and there's a lot of people who need support in our community. I know this because I have been a social worker on the ground, and I do understand some of the communities that are impacted and are struggling the most. Further, I'm also very much interested in making our communities a safe, secure place for all. And some of you may not be new to the fact that there's been a lot of young people in our community that have been impacted by gun violence, and I don't think anybody in this room will find that surprising. And throughout this is one of the reasons why in this election, I am the only candidate that has made safety and security and being a role model and bringing us support and bringing voice to this issue of youth gun violence. I have been to funerals, I've been to burials, and I want to make sure that this comes to an end. So this is one of the reasons why I'm running. And further to that, okay, so just maybe give us how this timing works, so just so we do it ourselves. Okay, no problem, thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdi. Our next speaker is Jean-Luc Cook, the Green Party candidate in Nepean. Mr. Cook.
Thank you. Testing? Great. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Jean-Luc Cook. I am the Green Party candidate in the riding of Nepean. This is my third election, and I want to thank all the organizers for organizing this. I was commenting earlier that it seems in each one of my elections there's a premier all-candidate citywide debate. The first year that I ran, it was the federal civil servants who had a debate with the late Paul Dewar and late Myril Bélanger. The last year it was the mayor's debate, and this year I believe this is it. It's such a prescient time. So I'm an engineer by education. I started my own information security cryptography firm coming out of school. So my background is in small business, but the geeky, nerdy kind. And I've worked almost exclusively in small business ever since. And I joined the Green Party some 10 years ago because I wanted to be part of democracy. I found myself lacking in my choices, and I wanted to be part of that change. My other roles in the Green Party is I'm currently the president of the Green Party of Canada. So one of the duties among many that I have is actually closing nominations in ridings across the country. There's a committee of us along with the leader that does this, and we've always really pushed to have contested nominations, nominations where there are women running, people of color, people who are non-gender binary. We really push for a lot of that diversity, and there's obviously more work to go on there, and we'll discuss more of that this evening. What I think is also important in this time and in this age is, of course, climate change, but the only way to really tackle the big issues is to do it together. And this is one of the reasons why I've come here tonight with my fellow candidates, Angela Keller-Herzog from Ottawa Centre and Oriana Ngabirano from Ottawa Vanier. If you notice, I am not a person of color, and the reason is, quite frankly, candidates who are people of color aren't the problem. And as the president of the party, I think it's important that I stand here and discuss our party's position on these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cook. Our next speaker is Greg Fergus. He is the Liberal Party candidate for Hull-Aylmer. Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup, Adrienne. Merci beaucoup, Sarah. Et bonsoir. Merci de votre présence ici ce soir. Et j'aimerais aussi reconnaître que je suis accompagné aujourd'hui par deux de mes collègues de la Chambre des communes, Chandra Arya, le député de Nepean, et puis aussi Mona Fortier, la députée d'Ottawa-Vanier. I would like to thank the 613-819 caucus, 613-819 Black Hub for having organized this event. It's important for us to have an opportunity to talk in more than a soundbite way about the realities which are being faced by the Black communities and also racialized communities, not only in the National Capital Region, but of course across the country. In 2015, I had the great honor of being elected as one of 3 Black members of Parliament from Quebec. And it was amazing. We had more Black members or people of African descent members from, who were elected from Quebec than they were in Ontario, where of course they have twice the population in terms of where my home province is. One of the things which we did as all the Black members, there were 7 of us who were elected, people of African descent who were elected in the 2015 Parliament. We decided to form a Black caucus, and that was an important step. We not only met as caucus members, we all on our House of Commons side happened to be all Liberal, but we also met with the independent senators of the times which has varied between 2 and 3 Black or people of African descent who are members of the Senate. And we'd meet in a nonpartisan way to try to advance the issues which are really important to our communities across the country. And what we did, I think, is an amazing, we have an amazing track record. One, from putting Viola Desmond on the $10 bill to recognizing, having the Prime Minister be the first Prime Minister to recognize the existence of anti-Black racism, to the adoption of the UN Decade of People of African Descent, to 2 budgets in a row where we've had tens of $million investment on programs and activities which are directed at the Black communities. And just to wrap it up, we are the party who put in our platform to have further measures which are going to be directed toward the Black community, to fighting anti-Black racism. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fergus. Our next speaker is Angela McEwen. She is the New Democratic Party candidate for Ottawa West Nepean. Ms. McEwen.
Thank you, and I'd just like to echo what everyone else has said. Thank you to the organizers for organizing this. It's very important, and I'm honored to be participating for the New Democratic Party. I'd also like to recognize we have Stephanie Mercier, who's the NDP candidate in Vanier, and Jackie Weens, who is the NDP candidate in Orleans. And we have our member of provincial parliament here for Ottawa Centre, Joel Harden. The NDP platform recognizes that the status quo is not working for many people, and we're trying to address that issue broadly. So our plan is to tax the rich a little bit more. We've been cutting taxes on the rich for the past 30 years with the promise that that's how we get a sustainable economy. We're recognizing that that hasn't worked. That's widened inequality. So we're going to tax the rich a little bit more, and we're going to invest it in things that help everyone. We're going to build new housing. We're going to invest in healthcare, and we're going to address climate change in a way that makes life affordable for people, but also creates jobs. But if we want to address anti-Black racism and the ongoing trauma of Indigenous people in Canada, we need to go beyond that simple issue. And we do address it in our platform. We talk about how we need to address the criminal justice system and employment equity system in Canada. So I'm a labor economist, and the issues that I often get asked are, can you get me a breakdown of the data so that I know what the wage gap is for Black workers in Ontario or Nova Scotia? And often the answer is we only have it from the census, and so by the time we get it, it's 2 years out of date. So we've been pressuring Statistics Canada to get accurate data, and we've been working on that for years. They do have a center now for gender and inclusion, and there is, okay, I'm already using up all my time. Sorry about that. So I am looking forward to telling you how our platform will specifically address both recognizing the successes in the Black community and recognizing the ongoing and intergenerational trauma and the systemic barriers that are faced by the Black community in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McEwen. And our final speaker is Dr. Alain Musende. He is the People's Party of Canada candidate in Carleton. Dr. Musende.
Thank you to everyone in attendance. I am Dr. Alain Musende. I am part-time professor at the University of Ottawa, where I teach biopharmaceutical sciences. I am also a manager with Health Canada. I'm happy to be here, and I have colleagues, my candidates for the People's Party of Canada, both sides, if you can raise your hands. There. Well, some experts have said that this election is about nothing, like the TV series of Seinfeld. Why? Because many Canadians believe that political parties lack the vision and courage to present bold policies that are going to improve the fiscal health of our country and of Canadians. The People's Party of Canada has such bold policies. Why? Because we intend to govern on behalf of all Canadians. We put Canada first, and we do not pander to special interest groups. For example, under the People's Party's government, your tax dollars will no longer be used to give to big corporations $5 billion a year in corporate welfare. If you sell your stocks and shares, real estate, and it has increased in value, you're no longer going to pay tax on the gains because we're going to abolish the capital gains tax. Third, we will decrease the price of food because we're going to abolish the supply management cartel. Finally, with the debt of $700 billion, accumulating at a rate of $54 million a day, we go to bed, we wake up, another $54 million. So we intend to balance the budget within 2 years. And don't let anybody tell you that it's not realistic. It is, because former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien did just that. So the People's Party of Canada is not anti-anybody or any entity. We are simply pro-Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Musende. I'm going to begin with you. In January of this year, the former Treasury Board President, Jane Philpott, said the government is aware that bias in the federal public service is preventing black workers from being promoted to the bureaucracy's highest levels. Although black people are proportionately represented in the public service, they generally don't occupy the top jobs. Black federal public servants report facing anti-black racism and discrimination at work and are severely sanctioned when the issue is raised with managers and supervisors. What will your party do to address this? Dr. Musende.
Well, like our ancestors say, if you don't know your past, you will not have any clue on your future. How did we get here? I'm going to start by quoting the current Minister of Heritage and Multiculturalism, Mr. Pablo Rodriguez. He said that we know that throughout our history and even today, there are people and community who face systemic racism and discrimination in our country. What does that mean to black people? One thing, the truth. 152 years of governance by the liberals and the conservatives yielded systemic racism. That's the fact. Our government, what we're going to do first, black people and the PPC, we must recognize that a key contributor of racism is the lack of opportunity and the lack of prosperity. So we have measures for that, starting by balancing the budget. That's the first step. Not borrowing for prosperity. So every policy that I have stated so far is there. We do politics differently. The law must apply. There is the Employment Equity Act that is in place. But look at it. What does it say? The federal government is supposed to put that in place. It says that people of designated groups, including black, are there, but so are white women, white people with disability, and so forth.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap. Thank you.
Une chose qu'on n'a pas faite, c'est de dire à tous les candidats que la question est posée en anglais et elle est répétée en français. Non, non, non. Ils posent la question en anglais et je répète en français pour nos francophones. Et vous pouvez répondre soit en anglais ou en français, comme vous voulez. Donc c'était une question sur l'équité en matière d'emploi. Non, c'était où? Ah oui, c'est en janvier de cette année, la présidente du Conseil du Trésor, d'alors Jane Philpott, a affirmé que le gouvernement est conscient du fait qu'il existe des préjugés au sein de la fonction publique fédérale qui empêchent les fonctionnaires noirs d'être promus au plus haut niveau de la bureaucratie. Et même si les Noirs sont représentés de façon proportionnelle dans la fonction publique, généralement, ce ne sont pas eux qui occupent les très hautes fonctions. Donc, les fonctionnaires publics, des fonctionnaires fédéraux affirment faire l'objet de racisme et de discrimination au travail et sont sévèrement sanctionnés lorsqu'ils le signalent aux gestionnaires. Et la question, c'était que fera votre parti pour remédier à cela? Et M. Musende a répondu au nom. Oui, c'est ça.
Thank you. Alors, c'est tellement important pour le service civil, the civil service, de refléter le pays qui donne le service. It's really important that the federal civil service has to reflect the people which they are providing service to. This is why it only seems elemental that the good Dr. Jane Philpott, should she be reelected, we would be welcome to talk to her as part of the Green Party. But the Treasury Board Secretariat should report to Parliament annually on the ethnic, the cultural, and the gender mix within the civil service. It should be a report to Parliament so parliamentarians know how the civil service, which they are responsible for, is serving and representing Canada. Il doit y avoir un rapport aux collines de Parlement, au Parlement même, d'avoir une représentation d'un rapport de c'est quoi les proportions de toutes les religions, toutes les personnes qui travaillent dans le service fédéral pour savoir comment le service fédéral représente le Canada.
Angela McEwen.
Thanks. We'll try a different mic. That works better. Right. So I think part of the problem we're talking about reporting on representation is that right now in employment equity law, it's just visible minorities. We don't break out, and that's the technical term that StatsCan uses. There's definitely a lot of discussion, and at my work we use the word racialized. I know that certain elders prefer visible minority, so whichever word you prefer to use, I understand. But that if we break out Black as a separate category, then it becomes easier to see the more distinct racism that is faced by that community in the federal public service. Right now, that is not tracked. So we would need to establish a task force to identify the racism faced by that group of people in the federal public service. And I think we should do that for all employment equity legislation. We should make the case for inclusion in the public sector, but we should definitely lead by example in the public sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McEwen. Greg Fergus.
Merci pour cette constatation. C'est important de savoir, tout d'abord, j'aimerais remercier certains groupes qui sont ici ce soir pour le travail qu'ils ont fait, qui a mené à cette situation où l'ancienne présidente de la Conseil de Trésor avait fait ses remarques. J'aimerais féliciter the Federal Public Service Black Caucus, and I think it's FBEC actually, Federal Black Employees Caucus, FBEC, for having organized this meeting and session that they had with the Treasury Board Secretariat, and also the 819-613 Black Hub, as well as on a political side, Black Caucus, which brought the minister and also senior public servants together for a number of sort of sensitivity awareness issues. Let me just get straight to the point. We do have a problem. As she pointed out, blacks do meet their employment equity numbers if you take a look at the large picture. The problem always breaks down is when you start taking a look at it a lot closer. And so our government has taken steps, and I know this as a former parliamentary secretary to the Treasury Board president, is to making sure now that we're going to start recognizing, looking at what levels that blacks are exceeding. Why are they not exceeding to those levels? Is there we know there's systemic discrimination that's happening, and how do we address that? And there are a number of ways which we can do that.
Abdul Abdi.
Thank you. For me personally, what I think is we need to start from the top. And we need to start from environment, and we need to start from an early age. We're talking about a system, right? And before the system, there's the foundation. And the foundation is education. And that education is what we need to focus on in our communities, because what happens is when we end up going into the public service or any other system of government, it is going to be our education, our merit. And that is why it is very, very important for our community from an early age to start encouraging the importance of business, the importance of entrepreneurship, the importance of independence, and the importance of education. And so for me, I'm going to focus on that. When you talk about the public service in terms of what we can do, obviously there's many, many things that will come about. And of course, I want to make sure that I'm a champion in terms of ensuring we have inclusion from different communities and cultures and representation. But I think it is very important for us to understand that we also have to change our culture of how we see ourselves as a community in terms of moving forward. Thank you.
If I can just ask you to clarify that, what does that mean? We have to change. What does that mean exactly?
What I'm saying by that is basically what I'm saying is, as a community, we need to be able to encourage our young people to understand the importance of getting engaged in education, in business, in entrepreneurship. At this point in time, it sometimes happens that a lot of young kids in our communities may not necessarily feel that that is something that oftentimes they focus. If you look at schools, for example, in Toronto, the numbers are pretty obvious in terms of the high school rate, dropout rate. So what I'm saying to ourselves is, as a community, we need to encourage our young people from an early age the importance of education, importance of entrepreneurship, importance of business. So when they get even into the public service, they are going to be way, way ahead in terms of involvement and engagement, and based on their merit as well.
This is an important issue, and I think we need to kind of to have a good discussion about it. So I'm going to ask anyone who wants to respond. Mr. Fergus, go ahead.
However, I'm sure this is on the minds of our audience as well. Will you support designating Black Canadians as a distinct group under the Employment Equity Act and enforcing the Employment Equity Act that people have mentioned, including the employment targets, with financial penalties for non-compliance? Je vais répéter en français parce que c'est très important. On veut parler des fonctionnaires qui sont déjà dans le système. Seriez-vous en faveur de respecter la loi sur l'équité en matière d'emploi, y compris ses objectifs en matière d'emploi et les sanctions financières en cas de non-conformité?
So, do you want to answer that, and also respond to Mr. Abdi?
I'll happily do both, and I'm not going to make this into a partisan issue because I think this is bigger than parties. One of the great successes that we had as Black Caucus is that we were able to get the government to commit to putting millions of dollars into Statistics Canada to start breaking out, to disaggregate the data so that we can actually make changes to things that we can measure. So it's not just having it all in the balloon of visible minority, but to break out what is happening with Black Canadians. Because the figures have shown us, and studies have shown us, that Blacks who are no more likely to commit a crime are 4 times more likely to be arrested for a crime and convicted. Blacks who are no more likely to consume cannabis are 4 times more likely to be arrested for possession and consumption of cannabis. Blacks who are no less educated in a public service are less likely to move up the ladder. So we have to break out the numbers. We have to disaggregate the numbers so we can do that. And that is what is being happening now. And I think that behooves any government, I would hope, to push for those policies.
Is there a specific question about supporting the designation of Black Canadians as a distinct group?
That's precisely the point that we're trying to take, and that's, we do know that next to Indigenous peoples rather, that Black Canadians are as a group, the second worst off group, and that was a whole notion of why the Prime Minister recognized anti-Black racism and systemic discrimination, so that we can use that as a model to start breaking down these figures within the public service.
Angela McEwen, you're nodding your head. I take it that you concur.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, because what the research shows us is that there's a wage gap. When you do get that disaggregated data, you see that Black women with university degrees are paid 67 cents on the dollar to a white man with the same university degree and the same experience. And so it's nothing to do with effort or education levels. It's actually quite obviously broken down to discrimination. And so in order to break down that discrimination and those barriers that people are facing, we need to have that data, but we also need to have reporting and transparency and the discussions that you're talking about, and we need to elect leaders that push for those things. Like, I absolutely think that representation matters, and that we need to do more work to have leaders that are pushing for them.
Dr. Lamassoure, there seems to be a consensus emerging here. Would you agree with your comrades on either side here?
Sorry. Yes, but I really would like to not lose focus. I'm glad that you provided us with more time. I don't know if everybody understands precisely what is meant by systemic racism, as acknowledged by the minister. That means racism that permeates the whole society. Okay? So those deputy ministers that are running those departments are members of the society. And the problem is far deeper. When Prime Minister Trudeau, the video came up of him mimicking black monkeys with the tongue out. I'm not interested in whether he's racist or not, and I don't care about that or what happened 10 years ago. But what I wanted to emphasize is his explanation of his action. He said that his privileged background gave him a blind spot to racism. Translation, people that benefit of the privilege of racism, many of them are not even aware that they're being racist. So the problem is far deeper, beyond just the Employment Equity Act and things like that. For sure, I will support considering black people as a specific group. But keep in mind, black folks, and I'm black too, it's a dangerous game. Because next, there's going to be another group, and there will always be groups that are more powerful than you and will benefit more. The Employment Equity Act is there. There are deputy ministers who claim to meet it. Why? Because they have employed many white women, many white folks of disability. They have met the requirement.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The original question came around changes to the Employment Equity Act. I think the Employment Equity Act does form too large a granularity on what a racialized person is or is not. So yes, I am in agreement that the Employment Equity Act does need to be upgraded. Going back to the federal civil service, roles of assistant deputy minister are fundamentally political ones. You can tell because the positions always change after an election. So frankly, these positions are political, and they should be made politically representative of Canada. Mr. Abdi, I'm a little concerned that, well, first of all, I'm inspired at the conversation about how education is the path, how to move society forward. I agree. Unfortunately, that'll take about 40 years. I myself and my children are probably not ready to wait that long to see a society more equitable, less racialized. Our leader, Elizabeth May, made a point-blank answer to a reporter today. Is Canada a systemically racist country? And she said, yes. Without hesitation, the reporter dug in for more, and she said, look, it is. You look around, you see these 1,000 paper cuts that people who are visibly minority, who are First Nations, that they suffer on a daily basis. And I as someone who wishes to represent my community, who is a very multicultural community, I can't wait 40 years for that kind of resolution.
Thank you very much for that. I just want to make sure that I don't want to be misunderstood. I am 100% for ensuring that we get any kind of systemic barriers from our community, whether it's within the police service, to which I'm part of, whether it's the city, whether it's the province, whether it's the federal government. I have always been a fighter in this community when it comes to encouraging our community members to get involved and moving any barriers along the way. That is 100% been my agenda since I've been in this community for the last 30 years. My record speaks for itself, and I'm going to continue to defend that. What I was saying at the beginning of my conversation is to ensure that we make our community at a very, very early age, empower them, start with our young people and education and business and entrepreneurships so that they have their own independent one day. And yes, the public servants, we know there is issues of systemic racism. I'm sure there's studies that have acknowledged it. We're not blind to that. We know those are facts. I will be there to support as a champion, but I'm going one step further to say that let us also make sure that we don't wait another 40 years to be talking about the same conversation.
Thank you. Merci. So we're going to move on to another topic, which also exhibits systemic discrimination. Since 2005, the number of black inmates in Canadian jails has grown by 69%. Black Canadians now represent the fastest growing group in federal prisons and are vastly overrepresented behind bars, while African Canadians make up 3% of the general population. They account for 10% of the federal prison population. Je vais répéter en français. Depuis 2005, le nombre de détenus noirs dans les pénitenciers canadiens a augmenté de 69%. Les Canadiens noirs représentent désormais la population qui croît la plus rapidement dans les prisons fédérales et sont largement surreprésentés derrière les barreaux. Alors que les Afro-Canadiens représentent 3% de la population générale, Ils représentent 10% de la population carcérale dans les prisons fédérales. So the question is, what would you do to address the overrepresentation of Black Canadians in the criminal justice system and the underrepresentation of Black lawyers at the Department of Justice? Que feriez-vous pour remédier à la surreprésentation des Canadiens de race noire dans le système de justice pénale et la sous-représentation des avocats noirs au ministère de la Justice? On commence avec Angela McEwen.
Thank you. So the NDP platform commits to a national task force to end the chronic overrepresentation of Black Canadians and Indigenous peoples in Canadian prisons. And we specifically have promised an African Canadian justice strategy to work with Black Canadians who have experience and expertise in criminal justice issues to do exactly what you're asking for. Among the things that we think would be useful is reducing a reliance on mandatory minimums and allowing trial judges greater discretion, to have more reliance on community-based and restorative approaches to justice, to expunge all previous marijuana convictions because, as the honourable member pointed out, there's an overrepresentation of young Black people with those convictions. And that we would increase the funding to legal aid to make sure that people who can't afford lawyers themselves can have a greater access to justice. Because right now, there's a whole segment of society that doesn't have access to justice because they don't have access to a legal system that recognizes their situation and that is in it to help them.
Okay. Greg Fergus.
Encore une fois, merci pour ça. Puis merci pour cette question. Puis c'est quelque chose qu'on avait déjà pris des actions là-dessus durant notre premier mandat. Puis on s'engage à faire encore davantage dans notre deuxième mandat, si vous vous donnez ce privilège. Tout d'abord, on avait créé quelque chose qui s'appelle le cadre de sécurité nationale dépourvu des préjugés. C'est une initiative révolutionnaire. On va ajouter 11 millions de dollars pour s'assurer qu'on peut former, on peut s'assurer qu'il n'y a pas de discrimination ou de discrimination systémique dans notre système juridique. Et ça, c'est une initiative this is an initiative that has built on work which has been done by this government already, and we're going to put $11 million more into this. It's also being built on the training of judges so that we can make sure that they have anti-bias training, because this is where it really happens. When people see a blackface, they're more likely to get a longer crime or to be convicted. Whereas if they see a non-black face, aside from Indigenous Canadians, Indigenous peoples, that they would give them a lighter crime because they can work that out. But for some reason, we get into our heads when we see a Black person that we think crime. And that has to change.
Despite your efforts, and you've been in power now for 4 years,
yeah,
the trend is not reversing. So what isn't happening? What aren't you doing?
Well, first, there are a number of things which are happening. We just started doing this work in terms of training our judges. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing, we also have to ensure that we let judges be judges and stop this, these automatic offenses which always happen. The automatic sentencing which is worked out. That's something which we haven't gone as far as we need to go, and I'm looking forward for us doing that in the second mandate.
Thank you very much. I will let you guys know that under if we form a government under Scheer, we're the only party right now when it comes to making the issue of crime prevention, especially going after young people who are getting involved in gang activities, to provide a fund in place to ensure that. I am very, very, very proud of that, and if we form government, I will make sure that if I get elected, I become one of those individuals who's going to make sure that this becomes a national effort for us. Reality is, I would agree with my brother in the sense of, yes, there are a lot of young people in our community who are getting involved, in activities such as the ones we're seeing. Ottawa, last year, 86 shootings in the city. The last 4 years, we're averaging about 20 homicides per year. These are numbers that are absolutely out of control. I know I've made it clear many times. You may have heard of me saying I've been to funerals, I've been to burials. I've had to deal with parents who have lost their loved ones. I have been on top of people who've been murdered. I understand what the plight of this community is. And so what I'm proposing is that we look at the root causes of some of the issues. I believe oftentimes we do not do a follow-up measurable in terms of governments giving money to organizations. We don't know what the outcome is. I think we should be able to go at the beginning, talk to communities at the grassroots levels, go to young people, give them opportunities, whether it's providing role models, whether it's ensuring that we work with municipal governments, whether we make sure that we provide programs for after-school programs. We have to make sure that we invest in our young people, give them jobs, skills trades. That's something we don't often focus. My point I'm making here is let's find a path for our young people away from this infestation that has really has taken so many lives unnecessarily, and I believe that we have the best program moving forward for this.
Just to be clear, Mr. Abdi, so you're saying that you would be an advocate within your party, within your government, to increase investments in communities and increase investments in services?
Absolutely. Let me make that clear again, 100%.
Because you know that your party has a reputation as being the law and order party.
That's okay. That's all right. Very healthy conversation. But let me tell you this. I am running because this issue has really affected me personally. I am the only candidate who's been on record, and put this issue of safety and security and many young lives we've lost in this community on my platform. The only person who's fighting for it. And if I get elected, I guarantee you will never have a better champion in terms of making sure that we provide the support that our young kids need in this community that for many years have been forgotten.
Please hold our applause. Please, 1 second. Please hold the applause. Okay, thank you. Mr. Cook.
Obviously, Mr. Abdi, we can hear your passion in your voice, and I believe you. I hope that your party would be able to listen to you if you do get elected. And I mean this in all seriousness. The underlying problem of why people who end up down the path of crime is often happening well before then. It's poverty, it's lack of opportunity, and as for lawyers who are Black Canadians, same thing. Tuition for law school is prohibitive. And this is coming from a guy who came from engineering school, dirt cheap compared to law school. So the Green Party's platform is to actually make post-secondary education free for everyone. This is vital because in a healthy society, there has to be what's called vertical mobility. The correlation between someone who is poor and then their children being poor again is incredibly high. And we need to break that down. And all over the world for the last half century, the one factor that really breaks that connection is access to higher learning. Mandatory minimum sentences are, of course, a problem. Judges are supposed to be knowledgeable. They're the ones who are supposed to administer justice. The purpose of justice is correction, deterrence, and social order. Correction being the main one, and you can't have correction when you go into prison and you're not learning any new skills and you're not getting a job lined up for when you come out. We need to connect this. We need to make correction as a temporary measure, not a lifelong career.
Because this is such an important issue, I'm going to allow, does anyone have anything to add? Oh, Dr. Musende, you hadn't spoken. My apologies. You're next.
Thank you. The issue of the justice system, the over-incarceration, these are just symptoms to the fundamental illness of systemic racism. This is just the symptom. So I'm not going to address the symptom. I'm going to go back. Because everything that is being presented here as solution, there is absolutely nothing new. Has been tried in the US, went nowhere. 152 years of the same thing. Like the old saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 152 times, way beyond shame on us. So, one of the fundamental pillars of the People's Party of Canada is personal responsibility. And that's where I'm going to tend to agree with Abdi. The black people should take the responsibility. You don't have to constantly wait for somebody to create a job for you. Okay? So, what we're going to do...
Just one second. Okay. We do have some ground rules here as part of this debate, and I would ask that everyone who is part of this audience respect that. Thank you.
So, we need in our communities, for example, engaging more and more in discussions about the job market. Instead of discussing politics endlessly, the job market, where are the new jobs? What are the trends? Where are the associated trainings? Bring that to our kids. How can we create these jobs ourselves? The program that I referred to here, abolishing the capital gains tax, we're doing this for entrepreneurs, for young entrepreneurs. They cannot get funding from the banks. So sell your stocks, sell your shares, sell your real estate. You're no longer paying tax on the gain. Invest that, create jobs. And then once you become powerful economically, the rest are details.
Dr. Musunde, I don't want to kind of get bogged down in a kind of historical argument, but I think there's an inaccuracy in what you said with regard to U.S. history, because the truth is that Lyndon Johnson's Great Society was very, very different from Ronald Reagan's approach to dealing with community, right? So Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s advocated investing hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars within communities. The question I wanted to ask you was, is your government, is your party, if it were to get into government, is it committed to making significant investments in community services, particularly programs aimed at young people?
Yes, here's the thing.
That seems at variance with your party leader, no?
Well, let me answer then. We are doing politics differently. We are not in the business of saying this tax break here, this money is for single women, single fathers, for tall people, for short people. No, we are in the business of giving opportunity to all Canadians. So that's the business we are in. So that prosperity should be there. And it's up to us to identify where this opportunity are and go there. Because if you start playing that game, this money for this group, guess what? The biggest winner are corporations. They get $5 billion a year in corporate welfare, your tax. Nobody, no group can ever match that.
But are you saying that black communities, though, don't have specific needs? They don't have special needs? You say they don't have special needs.
Black people are Canadians like me. So no, I'm serious. When I came to Canada, I came as an undergrad student in Montreal studying chemistry. I paid my tuition fees through tree planting. I thought when I graduate, I'm going back home. Never went. I have 4 kids here. My wife is there. The chances of going back home are slim to none. So this is my country. We need to improve this country for all Canadians. We should not kid ourselves. This is reality.
Okay.
Okay, so another issue that is going to be linked to lack of economic opportunity. Somebody's got their mic. Yes. Lack of economic opportunity. Housing. It's getting harder and harder for many black people to own a home, which is a key stepping stone to financial independence. What will you do to increase the federal government's role in providing affordable housing? Je répète en français. Il est de plus en plus difficile pour beaucoup de Noirs de devenir propriétaires d'une habitation, une étape essentielle à l'indépendance financière. Que ferez-vous pour renforcer le rôle du gouvernement fédéral dans l'offre de logements abordables?
We're going to start this round with Greg Fergus.
Thank you very much, and I'll be mindful of the time this time. So in terms of housing, we've introduced a 10-year, $22 billion housing plan, the first national housing strategy that this country has had. We will help 600,000 Canadians, especially racialized Canadians, find housing, affordable housing throughout the country. We have created a new housing benefit to help up to 300,000 Canadians with a high cost of rent. And this is an interesting approach. It's going to be a more person-centered approach. So the subsidy goes to the person person, not to the place, and that way we can making sure that our communities can make sure that they can find housing in the places where there are good schools, places where they have roots in their communities. That's what's important. Let me I have to just correct 3 errors which I think I've heard in the last section in regards to, in terms of what we should be doing on the justice issues. Mr. Abdi, with all due respect, you are not the only candidate who talks about these issues. There are certainly myself, Chandra, Mona, and Anita Vandenbeld, who has joined us here this evening, and the whole Liberal Party. It's part of our platform. I dare say it's probably the same thing in the NDP platform, and it's probably mentioned in the Green platform as well. So let's not try to make a virtue and mislead people on that front. Second thing.
You're pretty much out of time. Yeah, pretty much out of time. John Luke Cook.
Thank you. At the base of housing is, for those of you who've seen the movie The Big Short, right? This was a movie about the United States housing market, people getting drunk on risk, and then all of a sudden being drowned by it. In Canada, we have a mechanism called the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. And this is an entity that's designed to remove risk from the market by requiring people who get a mortgage to take a certain percentage, and it becomes a premium, so that if ever you go into default, the housing market will be insulated. Anyway, so that 5% is also used ever since the 1980s when this entity was created, remember when mortgages were 30% interest rates, to have an affordable housing funding mandate. This mandate has been massively underutilized for decades. The Green Party would actually see this funding that the Liberal Party wants to take CMHC, which is a risk removal entity, and actually use it to add more risk to the market and drive up housing prices even further. We would see that money actually go into creating affordable housing. Additionally, the Green Party's platform for a guaranteed livable income says that there is a floor by which we do not want anyone to fall through. There's a minimum level of income that people need based on where you are living in the country, the number will be different, that people need to have. And this is going to help an enormous number of people get up out of the true bottom of poverty and be able to afford the housing. And in addition, this affordable housing funding construct. I think the two of those together are going to work extremely well.
Mr. Cook, just ask you though, just to kind of follow up here. You know, you're claiming to be a great advocate for affordable housing, but you know, whereas your party is proposing to build tens of thousands of affordable units over the next decade, whereas the other parties are proposing to build tens of thousands of affordable units over the next decade, your party's only proposing to build 25,000 and to renovate 15,000. So why are you so, how do you explain the lack of ambition when it comes to affordable housing in your party?
Sure. It basically comes down to, do you want a federal government building community housing, or do you want to have the funding going to a city or municipality, or if you're in a rural area, province, building it? There are programs and there are bureaucracies in place, there's a bad word, to actually do this. So what we want to do is actually have the funding go to the expertise that are currently responsible for those activities and to fund them further, using the CMHC premiums to help fund that.
Dr. Alain Musende.
Well, thank you. First, I really like to clarify things so that everybody's on the same page. I'm not sure everybody understands what is meant by affordable housing. So it means when what you pay is more than 30% of your income before tax. Okay? So right there you can see that it is linked with your income, with the prosperity, with the jobs, and so forth. So again, we should refrain from always trying to tackle the symptoms without touching the illness. So prosperity, lack of jobs, and all of this are at the core of the concept of affordable housing. Our government, if you look at it, two angles. The other angle is the role that the provinces and municipalities have to play in affordable housing or building housings. The federal government gives money, but if you look at within the umbrella of affordable housing, the social housing aspect of it is managed by 80% by the provinces and the municipality. Chronic lack of money is an issue. What we're going to propose, for example, is, well, I shouldn't say we, because it's not on our platform right now, but what I would propose, to transfer, for example, 1% of the GST collected at the federal level to municipalities. So, which would yield a lot of money so that they don't have to rely on the generosity of the government of the moment, the prime minister of the moment. So they have this source of income, they can build the houses. And we take care of the prosperity, job creations, so that there is less need for affordable housing. People are lifted from poverty. Thank you.
Angela McEwen, you were nodding your head when Dr. Masinde was speaking, which would suggest that you support what he's saying.
No, I just found it interesting. So what I was thinking about actually was, so what the good doctor is proposing presupposes that there's some kind of level playing field out there in the economy, right? But we know the game is rigged. The reason that corporations get $5 billion in corporate welfare is because they have power that they use to influence lawmakers. That's why SNC-Lavalin didn't get taken to court or wanted to get out of getting taken to court, but Indigenous children were still appealing that case to the Human Rights Tribunal.
So what's your approach to affordable housing?
So our approach to the whole, if we step back and look at the whole picture, our approach of proposing a wealth tax and increasing taxes on corporation, that changes the game. That changes the power structure in our economy. We've gone too long giving corporations more power than they should have. We need to give power back to people on the ground. And that's our whole platform, is making that shift. And for housing, what we would do is build 500,000 units over the next 10 years, putting in an extra $5 billion in the first year. And we would prioritize co-op housing and not-for-profit housing. And we would have an agency that would help groups get the funding and the knowledge and the expertise to kickstart that development in communities. We would also put more money into social housing. Anita Vandenbelt at our debates, and I just want to say, I know I'm...
The Liberal candidate, you're going to have to wrap it up, though.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I have a huge amount of respect for Abdi. I have heard him speak about this issue from the heart, and he is an advocate for his community. The problem is that his party is not, and I don't think he's going to be able to change their mind.
Mr. Abdi?
Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, do you agree with Ms. McEwen?
Mr. Who?
Do you agree with what Ms. McEwen just said?
No, I don't. I will state what I was going to say is, first of all, we need to remove the barriers to prosperity in our community. That is first and foremost. And in doing so, that's why our universal tax cut we're bringing right now, the people who are going to benefit from a universal tax cut are going to be the people who are at the bottom. Anyone making $48,000 or less is the one that is going to be the most impacted and to be able to benefit from this tax. Why? It's because we want to put more money in your pocket. Further, we also want to make sure that we lower business tax. Why? Because we know our community has lots of people who have small businesses, who are entrepreneurs, and so we know the more money you have in your pocket, the better your prosperity to be able to own your home. And then that leads me to our 4-point plan, which is number one, we want to make sure that we make it easy to buy a home. So there's a stress home test. We want to deal with that, number one. Number two, we want to make sure that the amortization period for a house now is about 25 years. We want to extend that to 30 years so that your monthly payments are reduced. We also want to make sure that we investigate. There's lots of money laundering going on in the housing business, especially if you look at the West Coast. And what this does is it puts pressure on less units to actually buy or rent. So we want to deal with that, number three. And number four, we also want to make sure that we work with provincial governments and municipal governments to provide more land to build affordable housing. Thank you.
I just wanted to kind of maybe drill down a little bit, because I didn't hear, well, I guess towards the end, you kind of alluded to it. But first of all, does your party believe in building social housing?
Our party believes in empowering people to own their homes and to be able to assist those ones who are living in low-income communities. Look, my dream...
The question, does your party believe in building social housing?
My party believes in ensuring that people own homes and are successful, and we're able to help those people who are in low-income communities. So whether that includes helping people in social housing, absolutely we will support to ensure that they have a place to live. I mean, look, it's our social safety net, and I've always been a proponent of that, and I will always make sure that we support people in low-income communities, 100%. What I'm saying, though, it's better for you to have your own home, and our party is an advocate to, in fact, get you to that place.
I think it's aspirational to think that people who are living in poverty can make use of the plethora of tax credit programs that exist. Mortgage stress tests, very few people can meet the existing or even the modified mortgage stress tests. But for me, I'm also worried that mortgage stress tests, as they exist now, are there for a reason. They're there to say, if something bad happens to the market, can you still maintain your home? So I caution against changing the stress test. The boutique tax credits, they don't change behavior. So fundamentally, if you are living in poverty and someone says, I'm going to give you a tax break because you put your kids in hockey camp, that's not going to help you. And if you are putting your kids in hockey camp, getting that tax break isn't going to change the fact you've decided to put your kid in hockey camp. The data from the Harper years is in, and it's very clear. These boutique tax credits do not change behavior. They are vote buying.
Do you want to respond, Greg Fergus? And then I'll allow you to respond as well afterwards.
I would like to thank Mr. Cook for that comment, because he's absolutely right. That's exactly what happens with these tax credits. And with the stress test, folks, what the stress test is there for to stop happening is what had happened in 2008 in the United States. That is, you had people who had gotten easy credit to buy a house that they couldn't afford, and then when the market changed and interest rates went up, not by a whole bunch, but by just about 2 points, 2 percentage points, all of a sudden found themselves sacrificing everything, because no one wants to give up their home. So they will sacrifice on food, they will sacrifice on extra activities, they will do almost anything before they give up their home. And then once they give up their home, they're in such a sorry state. That's what led to the crisis in 2008. You want to avoid that. So you want to make sure that people who do, so poor people who want to buy a home, we shouldn't make it easier for them to get themselves in trouble when the economy goes south. Because who benefits from that? It's not the poor person, it's the person who lent them the money. And that's not on. So what you want to do is that you want to have affordable housing, which is put in place, cooperative housing, some forms of social housing. You want to make rental housing more popular. Canada has the highest home ownership rate in this country, about 70%. Higher ownership rate in the world, about 70% of Canadians own homes. So it's not that we're lacking on people buying homes. What we're lacking is an affordable rental housing that people can live and not spend more than 30% of their hard-earned and low income on getting a roof over their heads.
Dr. Musinde, and then Ms. McEwen, if you have anything to add.
No, I'm fine. I already said what I had to say on that issue.
Okay, Ms. McEwen?
Thank you. I just wanted to add that in our riding of Ottawa West Nepean, about 44% of renters are in core housing need. They don't have enough money to pay their rent. And I run into people, seniors that have been on the wait list for social housing for more than 5 years. And so our member of parliament will tell us that she was solely responsible for bringing in a new 40-person unit, but that did nothing to make a dent in the need. So we need to start looking at what the need is in the community and how can we meet that need as quickly as possible.
I think we're gonna move on. Did you want to? I think childcare.
Okay, so we're ready to move on to something that is linked. Okay, so you have a job, you're working, you need childcare. Parents in Canada continue to face exorbitant bills and long wait lists for childcare. What will you do to make this affordable, high quality, inclusive, and culturally appropriate, and make it available to all, including parents who work non-standard hours? En français, la garde d'enfants au Canada. Les parents sont encore exposés à des factures faramineuses et à de longues listes d'attente pour des places en garderie. Que ferez-vous pour mettre à la disposition de tous, y compris les parents qui ont un horaire de travail non traditionnel, des services de garde abordables, de qualité, inclusifs et adaptés aux particularités culturelles? We'll start with le docteur. Docteur?
Yeah, I know that this was not amongst the points that I received for discussion. But the one thing I would like to say first is this issue of exorbitant costs for childcare, as if it's actually punishing people for having kids. And this goes at the core of the immigration policy, for example, whereby, yes, the birth rate is going down, but why? So why can't the government focus on stimulating the birth rate? So with childcare like this, of course, people are less inclined to have more kids. So I think there must be measures in place that will not only make childcare more affordable, but also go beyond that, stimulate the birth rates also. Many European countries have been doing that. For example, we can have childcare, for example, free. I'm not saying that's in the platform of my government. Free for, say, the second.
What is the platform?
In our platform, it's now the status quo as it is. We don't have anything there. As I said, all these issues here, keep in mind, we are doing politics different.
But what does that mean when it comes to, like, there are Canadians who have specific needs when it comes to childcare. So what are you telling them your government would do to support them?
What I'm trying what we will trade them as with respect to our platform is that all of this we are discussing here are symptoms of a society with extreme high debt. For every dollar you are earning, you owe $1.75. So the problem is there. The problem is not the symptoms that we can haggle and debate forever.
Okay. Yeah. Angela McEwen, with regard to childcare?
The City of Ottawa put out a report earlier this year looking at how affordable childcare was for different income levels in Ottawa, and infant care is only affordable for a family that makes more than $200,000 after tax. And so the metric that they use is that it's no more than 10% of your after-tax salary. So that's a huge problem for parents of infants. If you aren't able to stay at home with your kids, if there's not somebody in your family that's able to stay at home and care for your children and provide that unpaid care work, it becomes a really difficult balancing act. And I've met parents that, have taken different shifts. So one will work night shifts or one will work weekends, and they'll kind of be juggling back and forth, which means the parents never get to see each other. There's only capacity in licensed care in Ottawa for about 1/3 of Ottawa children. And if we're talking about infant care or school-age children, there's fewer spaces. In terms of culturally appropriate care, there's not enough Francophone spaces in Ottawa West Nepean. There's not enough Indigenous spaces. There's not enough, and there certainly wouldn't be recognition for anything culturally appropriate for immigrant communities necessarily at a reasonable subsidized level. So the lack of affordable quality childcare impacts women's participation in the workforce. It impacts their retirement income, because if you're not working throughout your life, you're not collecting that pension, you're not paying into CPP, and it affects your ability to access other benefits like parental leave. Work in the first place, then you don't get EI. And so it just keeps on spreading these inequalities apart.
So just to be clear, is your party advocating universal childcare?
Yes.
How can your party afford all of these things?
So it wouldn't be.
You're advocating universal pharmacare. You're advocating universal childcare, billions and billions of dollars. Some people would say, when does it stop?
When does it stop? So here's the thing. Here's the great thing about universal pharmacare and universal childcare is that both of those programs pay for themselves in the long run. When Quebec brought in universal childcare, the $10 a day program or $7 a day program, it actually spurred women's participation in the labor force, and both the federal government and the provincial government raised more money in tax revenues because of that increased labor force participation. And when you invest in childcare centers, that spurs local economic development, because a multiplier effect for a childcare center, they do almost all of their purchasing locally. So if you're looking at spurring local economic development, childcare is actually a really good way to spend on it. There's lots of studies in Manitoba and rural areas about the impact of local childcare spending. Pharmacare, you're actually preventing people from getting sick, so you're saving money. So both of those programs actually save money in the long run. But we're implementing universal pharmacare right away, not universal childcare right away.
Okay. Mr. Cook?
Thank you. On this issue, actually, the NDP and the Greens agree on wholeheartedly. Dans la province du Québec, nous avons eu un système universel pour les petits-enfants et ce n'était pas la fin du monde. BC is now looking at what Quebec did, and they're not predicting the end of the world either. Fundamentally, childcare is a societal expense pursuant to income. So if you are a conservative, you understand what this means. This is an expense so that someone who can go off and work is free to do so, knowing that their child is taken care of. And Angela, you're absolutely right. As for high quality, racially diverse, and people in non-standard housing, the answer is you don't have an institutional childcare program. You have to have a funding program for local, community, possibly even in someone's own home, as many of them are in my riding. And this, of course, will spur small business because many childcare people are small business owners. This seems like such a no-brainer. You look at many other nations, especially, of course, the Nordic nations, as the Greens keep pointing to, they're very progressive on this because they realize that in most families, the man makes a little bit more than the woman, and that's not fair, but that is the reality. And when given the choice as to who stays home and who doesn't to pay for childcare, it's almost always the woman. But with their standardized childcare, universal childcare, then both can work and both can pursue their careers.
Mr. Abdi, universal childcare? Are you an advocate of that idea?
Thank you, Adrian. What we are advocating is to ensure that we support families in order to help them with childcare expenses. So one of those things that we want to do is to ensure that we take the taxes from the parental benefits. So if anybody goes on a maternity leave, they don't have to pay those parental benefits right now. But we also want to make sure that when it comes to our programs, many of the parents, the challenges they're facing oftentimes comes down to affordability. So this is why we want to make sure that our universal tax cuts goes to a lot of those families who are able to afford to ensure that they have a place for where their kids could go. We also want to make sure that there is no more issues when it comes to people who are looking for childcare spaces. So when we have to work with our municipal governments and any other provincial governments, we will ensure we provide the support you need. But the biggest thing for us is benefits to make sure that we lower your taxes, we give you the opportunities for you to get ahead. So that's all we're trying to do right now. We know that you need a support. We know parents need a support. Our entire job is to be able to provide them the support and the resources they need to get ahead.
Mr. Fergus.
So two things. One is, first of all, I'd like to just let everybody know that Quebec is a real leader on this in terms of providing affordable childcare spaces. How we got there, of course, is that we tried other things first. And one of the things that we tried to do is we tried the baby bonus to try to encourage people to have more kids. It didn't work. What we did find, what did work, was providing cheap childcare spaces. And so we had what was $5 a day childcare, which became $7 a day. Now it's about $15 to $20 a day. So you have to find the right balance. All this to say is that it's really the provinces who are the leaders on this. But what the federal government has done is that we've worked with the provinces to fund right now about 40,000 before and after school childcare spaces. That's making a big difference. We've also made an engagement to take it up to 250,000 before and after school childcare spaces, flexible spaces, spaces which are directed towards the community. That will cost about $7.5 billion. And that's what we've committed to in our.
But if you see the value of affordable childcare, why not make it universal?
Well, we could love to make it universal, but as we saw the challenge in Quebec, and let's learn from Quebec's example, is that you have to figure out how to find that right balance and at what cost. So if you make it universal free, it was really quite expensive for the province to provide it at $5 a day, and so
But you bought a pipeline.
Yeah, but you know what? But
You bought a pipeline.
And we've also invested in other things. So we could, we bought a pipeline. Yes, you're right. But we've also invested in reducing poverty in this country by 1/3 in 4 years, which has never been done before. And that was done through the Canada Child Benefit. I mean, these are things, we can pick each one of us can pick the favorite thing that we don't like about what a government does out of 1,000 things that the government does. But let's take a look at the overall push and what we've been doing. We've put in money for the Canada Child Benefit, which, as I said, in 4 years has reduced poverty by 1/3 in this country. Ask any social policy expert, that's never been seen. When I showed up in this town in 1988 to be a parliamentary page, I remember that just shortly afterwards there was this solemn hand-on-the-heart promise that all MPs took that they were going to eliminate poverty in this country by the year 2000. We overshot that we never made a dent in that until 2015, and now we've reduced it by 1/3.
Dr.
Our history, it's under 10.
Dr. Musende, you looked like you wanted to say something.
Well, the member of parliament said that they tried to stimulate birth rate. It didn't work. They've tried to eliminate systemic racism. It didn't work. So if you're trying things for 152 years, it's not working. The responsible things to do, stop governing.
I'm not certain if I see the connection between systemic discrimination. I'm not certain if Canada has actually firmly taken that on until recently. I think there's been a collective consciousness raising which has happened in this country that we actually want to deal with these issues.
Yes, the point I'm making is we have been trying things, as you admitted again, on the birth rate, it didn't work. So that's the point I've been making.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to the next topic. We're at 8 o'clock, and I'm going to ask, we started a couple minutes late. Would it be possible for us to extend things for 10 more minutes? Would that be okay with everyone here? Yeah? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so immigration, one of our favorite topics, immigration. We've seen horrible scenes of black people losing fingers to frostbite while trying to enter Canada from the US in the middle of winter. They say they're doing this because they feel their lives are threatened under the current US regime. Under the Canada-US Safe Third Country Agreement, they get sent back to the US because that's where they first landed. This agreement made sense when the US was safe, but now it's not. Will your party suspend the Safe Third Country Agreement with the US? And will your party make family unification a priority? En français, nous avons vu d'horribles scènes de personnes noires qui perdent des doigts à cause d'engelures en tentant d'entrer au Canada en provenance des États-Unis en hiver. Ils disent le faire parce qu'ils estiment que leur vie est menacée par l'actuel régime américain en vertu de l'entente entre le Canada et les États-Unis sur les tiers pays sûrs. Ils sont renvoyés aux États-Unis. Cet accord était logique à l'époque où l'on pouvait vivre en toute sécurité aux États-Unis, ce qui n'est plus le cas. Votre parti va-t-il suspendre cette entente, 1? Et 2, est-ce que votre parti va prioriser l'unification de la famille?
Mr. Abdi.
All right, so first of all, I think the way our immigration system in terms of a conservative party, we're looking at it from the point of we have to make immigration legal. That is the first thing. It has to be legal. It has to be also proper. We are a country of law and order. We're a country of borders. I came in this country as a refugee. I do understand the importance of immigration. I am absolutely 100% for immigration. But I want to make sure that also our immigration is legal. We want to make sure that our immigration is also compassionate. We want to make sure there are countries around the world that want to make Canada home. I want to make sure that we open our borders to those who want to come to Canada legally and compassionately. But at the same time also, Canada is looking for people who can also contribute economically. So we have to be able to find people who have the skill sets that we need. There are a lot of people, I'm sure in your countries of origin right now, that have the skills they need to come to this country and to contribute. So that's one of the things that we have to also look at. Look, I've been doing door knocks, and sometimes this issue comes up where people are talking about what's happening at the border. And there are people who are, most of it, just looking like us, who are saying, I've been trying to sponsor my family for the last 5 years, 4 years, but my file just keeps sent back, and it's been sent back. And the answers that they're getting is because now the system has been exhausted and the system has been bogged down. And I think they are pointing at fingers at some of the people who are coming into the country in a way that is not necessarily the legal way, and that's why I believe we have to make sure that our Canada is a country of immigrants. We need immigrants. I am 100% for immigrants. What I'm saying is, according to our party, we want to make sure it's legal. We want to make sure it's compassionate. We want to also make sure that it is in the best economic interest of Canada. And I think we have a very good balance there, and I think that's something that many people will be able to support.
And very, very quickly, just to the question, will your party suspend the safe third country agreement with the U.S.?
Well, at this point in time, that's a question that I can't give you the answer right now, but I can tell you that if an opportunity presented itself down the road, I may be able to share that with you.
Mr. Cook?
So, of course, we have to have a clear, fair, and compassionate, but also a thorough path for citizenship for people arriving in Canada, mostly just so that people know what they're getting into. As for the Safe Third Party Agreement, I weep for the United States right now, and I want to believe that they can one day come back to the point where we can, with an honest face, say that it is a safe place for people to be returned to. But I don't believe that's the case right now.
Your party would suspend the agreement?
I would advocate that we suspend it, with anxiously awaiting the time when we can reinstate it again. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Now, as for immigrants who are coming to Canada, I can't put it any more simpler than this. There are too many lawyers serving coffee and too many engineers driving taxis. The problem with immigration isn't the quantity of immigrants. That's not the problem. The problem is skills need to be brought up and certified in Canada so people spend less time not working and more time becoming active and contributing members of society, which everyone wants to do. So we need to really be respectful of people who are coming to this country in the search of hope and not take it away from them. We need to get them up that curve so they can become contributing members of society.
Okay, Mr. Fergus.
I would like to thank you very much. I'll answer this question very carefully. And this one is one that gets me a little hot under the collar, so I'd like to apologize in advance if I'm not as moderate as I usually am. I don't like when we start talking about legal and illegal immigration. There's no such thing. It's regular or irregular, and that's an important distinction to make. There are three ways which a person can come to this country. One is through an application process as an economic immigrant. That's most people. We accept about 350,000 of those folks a year. That's how my parents came here. The second one is as a refugee. And those are people who are recognized, like Mr. Abdi, like our Minister of Immigration and Citizenship and Refugees, Ahmed Hussein, who was recognized by an international body as a refugee, and Canada accepts a certain number of refugees a year, roughly around anywhere between 25 and 50,000. We've had extraordinary years like we did with the Syrian refugees. And the third way are through asylum seekers. And these are people who don't have the ability to figure out how to get into this country either through the economic means, but they're fleeing in fear. So they feel. And these are the people who are crossing our borders at irregular spots, and they go through a system, I think the best system in the world, for determining whether or not they would meet the definition of an asylum seeker, and if they don't, they return to the country which they have status.
We're rapidly running out of time, but I did want you to answer the question though, and the question being, will your party suspend the safe third country agreement with the U.S.?
Because when you're not likely that we're going to suspend the the third safe country agreement, we would like to renegotiate it with the United States. But if we break it, what we're going to be left with is having sort of like detainee camps in this country. I don't think that's something that I would like, nor I don't think the Canadian public would probably go there as well. There has to be a way that we can negotiate with. I have confidence that the American people will make enlightened choice so that we can get back to a more normal relationship with the country.
Angela McEwen?
Yeah, we do have detainee camps. We have people that are held indefinitely here in Canada. So that is a problem, and we should probably deal with that. There are children that have grown up in detainee camps in Canada. So when Canada talks about what's happening in the United States as if that's somehow extraordinary and hasn't happened here as well under your watch, I mean, that's the height of arrogance, I think. I was going to say, what I was going to say before we got here is this is a question that I can answer in French. Oui.
So, meaning you would suspend the agreement?
The safe third country agreement, and we would prioritize family reunification. Canada already has an incredibly conservative, and by conservative I mean like the normal meaning of conservation, not that conservative. But we already have a very conservative immigration system where we prioritize economic, as you said, we prioritize economic immigration over all other kinds. And when you bring in immigration for family reunification, then you're bringing in somebody to take care of the kids, possibly, right? You're bringing in people that create more demand in our economy. So it doesn't matter that they can't necessarily take a job. They're creating demand, and they're creating that family culture that is so important to communities and building communities. We've definitely failed in prioritizing that and making it happen quickly. I had one of the first.
We're gonna have to wrap it up. Yeah.
My office is a former shawarma restaurant, so we get a lot of walk-ins that aren't necessarily there to see the NDP, which is great. So there's this guy who came in, and he was Egyptian, and he said, or he had emigrated from Egypt, and he's like, okay, what about family reunification? He said, it took me 15 years, and my wife divorced me because it was taking so long. And so, yeah, this creates real hardship in people's lives.
Okay, Dr. Musunde?
Yeah, the two questions. First, these third country agreement. When you govern, you have to govern based on the evidence. The decision must be evidence-based. That agreement came because of certain conditions that were in place. Unless these conditions are evidence-based that they have changed, you cannot change it. We cannot declare emotionally that the U.S. is no longer a safe nation because of what we see on TV. So, and the second question, so for that, we're not going to suspend it. We can review it. If the conditions change, we put in the interest of Canada first, then we review it with our counterpart. So the second family reunion, our party in fact, is the only party that is intending to increase the number of economic immigrants. Right now it's 26%. We want to bring it to 50%. Yes, family reunion is important. So we will do that.
Yet your party, the People's Party of Canada, is pledging to reduce the number of immigrants and refugees entering Canada from 321,000, the 2018 number, to between 100,000 and 150,000. We know that Canada's population is aging. According to the Conference Board of Canada, 25% of Canada's population will be over 65 by 2035. 5 million Canadians are set to retire by 2035. How does this make economic sense?
I can tell you, I can talk about this issue for hours.
We don't have hours.
Yeah, I have the report of the Conference Board of Canada. The issue of the birth rate and the aging population, when you govern, you want to make a decision, it must be evidence-based. You place all options on the table. The Conference Board of Canada looked at one single option, which is immigration. But there is another option. Why don't you stimulate the birth rate in Canada? So the Europeans do that too. So right now, 350,000 immigrants a year. In 3 years is 1 million. That's the population of Ottawa.
But it's not working for Europe. In terms of evidence, it's not working for Europe. The fact of the matter is that many countries in Europe, the population is aging, and they need people.
Well, do you know how many immigrants they bring? They follow the ratio, 0.5%. of their population. The US, France, UK. I have the data, even here.
Many countries aren't replacing they're not replacing the population. It's a problem.
Yes, but if they're not replacing the population, there are many of them, including Russia, that are stimulating the birth rate. I do not understand why that cannot be an option. We have to be obsessed of when you're governing, put all the cards on the table, make an evidence-based decision. If you decide to create a new city of Ottawa every 3 years, then tell Canadians, we in the People's Party, we say it like it is. Tell Canadians, I want to create a new city of Ottawa every 3 years. This is how much it's going to cost. This is the social impact. If they give you the mandate, go ahead, do that.
Does anyone want to very, very briefly comment? Mr. Cook?
No, I think we'll just let that lie right there.
Mr. Fergus?
I'd just like to get back to the notion of detainee camps. There were something that existed under Conservatives, under people who came in and we would hold them for a very longer period of time. We had removed that, and we made sure that people who come into this country to get access to healthcare, we get them for very quickly, but within now in about 3 weeks, as opposed to when it used to be 3 months, get them a work permit, so they're able to contribute and able to support themselves until the point that their case is being heard and determined and adjudicated.
Abdi?
Yeah, just a quick response. Just for those of you who don't know, Stephen Harper is no longer running. The Liberals keep talking about Stephen Harper every single time. If it's no's today, it's Stephen Harper's fault. Sir, you've been governing for the last 4 years. Take full responsibility for your government's actions and stop pointing the fingers at others.
Okay. So we had some audience questions, and we've noticed that some of them were kind of covered already. Gun violence, crime overrepresentation in the criminal justice system. One question that was not asked, child welfare, protection de l'enfance. Nous avons un nombre important de jeunes pris en tutelle, qui sont en tutelle par l'État, la Société de l'aide à l'enfance. Que serait votre plan pour atténuer ce problème, pour régler ce problème de trop de Noirs, d'Autochtones pris en charge par l'État? We have too many of our black children and youth in the child welfare system. What would you do to fix that problem?
And this will have to be the last question. So I'm going to ask Ms. McEwen to begin.
So this is primarily a provincial issue, and the federal government can provide leadership and advice, but it's a huge issue. And I think that what we've talked about before, where we've talked about the social determinants of health, and that if we have that big picture in place, if we have safe housing for people, if we have proper training in the criminal justice system, if we've ended carding, if we have the other pieces that we need to have in place, if we have a public health system where the public health nurse provides help rather than taking a child away from someone that doesn't have the resources in terms of money, then we have a healthier system. I know that it's a huge problem that the 60s scoop basically never ended for a lot of people, and yeah, I think we would have to work with provinces, and it's part of implementing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations. So I think that's kind of where we would want to go with that.
Dr. Musende?
Thank you, and I agree. One of the fundamental pillars of the People's Party of Canada is to respect the Constitution, which means we respect the provincial jurisdiction. This is a provincial issue, like the child care that we discussed early on. But again, these are all symptoms of a society debt-ridden. The country pays $26 billion a year on interest to the debt. $2 trillion in debt per household. Why are we surprised that we have these problems? It's normal. Fix the economy, fix the fiscal health, many of these problems will be reduced.
Mr. Fergus?
So there is a responsibility that the federal government has towards Indigenous peoples, but with regard to other forms on child safety and welfare, unfortunately, that is a responsibility of the provinces. We can exercise some leadership on that file, and in terms of some moral suasion. But with regard to, by funding different groups that would make advocacy for those things, or that they would be working to try to get their points across. But with regard to actually determining child welfare policies in this country, aside from Indigenous peoples, we don't have a responsibility in that front. That being said, we could.
Are you even being responsible when it comes to Indigenous children? The Human Rights Tribunal just delivered a judgment stating that the federal government should be paying $2.1 billion, and you're asking for judicial review. So when it comes to child welfare, what in fact are you doing with regard to Indigenous peoples?
So we're doing a lot, and we're implementing Jordan's principle on matters regarding Indigenous children. On this recent ruling, it's one which we agree with the objective of the ruling, and there are aspects of it which we would need to challenge.
Cindy Blackstock, who's a real kind of moral force in this country, has lambasted your government for this position.
And there's a lot to lambaste in terms of Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples.
No, she's talking about your government.
Right, but on our government, in terms of making sure that we are working with this one, this is one thing which we want to get to the root of the cause. It's our priority for us to do this, but there are elements of this that we just need to, that we're going to need to take a look at, and that's the reason why it's being challenged.
Mr. Abdi? Child welfare. Yeah, Black communities.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the question. I'm a firm believer, first of all. To me, I'll just go back to my youth days. I have seen kids who've been taken off their families and have been part of the system. I have been to group homes. I worked in foster homes. I'm a 100% advocate to ensuring that young people who've been removed to their homes are taken back to the communities that they most feel comfortable in terms of their own culture, in terms of their own religion, in terms of their own background, because it's also about the psychology of these young people. So I'll also, for the first time, also agree with my Dr. Musenda there to be able to say that we also have to understand we're a country of law in the sense of jurisdictional issues. So I'll be more than happy to work with the provincial counterparts to ensure that young people who've been taken off their families or are in the system have a safe return back to a very healthy and psychologically sound family or a community background.
When I hear the story of children's welfare and in social services, I'm reminded of a story I heard just this morning from my fellow Green Party candidate in Ottawa Vanier, Oriana. She went to a health clinic seeking some help, and there was an interaction that did not go well. And she had walked out, and by the time she got home, Child Protective Services were at her home. And Oriana is convinced it's because of these, what I talked about earlier, these 1,000 paper cuts, except this wasn't a paper cut. This was a stab in the back. She went somewhere to look for help, and she got the opposite of that. I think it is important for child welfare that we recognize that the 60s scoop that never ended, there's a constant scoop that's always going on. Perhaps it's not as big a scoop, but it's definitely still there. And this is part of the systemic racism in society that exists and that we're dealing with, and it's part of the reason why this discussion we're having here tonight with all these excellent candidates is so very important. On the mention of Jordan's principle, it's a tactic called, it's basically running out the clock. You wait until something just expires and then you let it die. It's an interesting tactic, but I think we do need to be much more aggressive on this. And at the provincial level, where healthcare services are provided, where a lot of child services are provided, we need to make sure that there is representation in the cultures themselves that are being scooped, because it's too prevalent, it's too personal for all of us. Well, frankly, not me, because, well, look at me. But we need to recognize that the problem is there and we have to improve it.
So you have 1 minute for a concluding statement each.
Go in reverse order as to how we began. So I think we'll start with Dr. Musinde.
Oh.
Yeah, Dr. Musinde. Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for everybody in attendance, and big thanks to the organizers and my fellow candidates. The only thing I'll tell you is that the country is going on the wrong path fiscally and has been for 152 years. This election, please vote for your conscience. Vote to make a change that will change the course of our country. Have the courage to do so. That's all I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Musende. Angela McEwen.
So a shockingly similar message. Yeah, I think we've been going back between red and blue for the past 150 years, and we haven't seen the action that we wanted. The difference between red and blue for me is that red learns exactly the right words that you want to hear, and they say them, but they don't put the money behind it. They don't put the action behind it. They just learn the words and parrot them over and over and hope that that's enough, because the scary guys in the blue are actually encouraging hate and racism and spreading memes that are terrifying. And so it seems like an easy choice. My leader has done a fantastic job being a racialized leader and being the only one that was asked about Bill 21 in the debate. So the work that racialized people do in this country in terms of educating others, in terms of bearing the emotional labor of that, I think has been highlighted on the national stage. And so that's been an interesting conversation that I have with people at the door, and I have with lots of white folks at the door, that now they're like, oh, I kind of see that. He was asked about.
We're going to have to wrap up.
So, yeah, okay. I like to talk. Vote NDP. I think that there's a huge orange door full of hope. Vote for change, and we'll try to keep the Liberals accountable and make some of those words.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Fergus.
Ladies and gentlemen, this evening you saw, first of all, thank you very much for being here this evening. And I think you saw that there are very good people of good character who are running, but who have different perspectives. And I'm asking you to take a look at our record. When we got into government in 2015, we were, not only did we just talk the talk, but we walked the talk. We made sure that we put Viola Desmond on the $10 bill. We recognized the existence of anti-black racism. We adopted the UN, first of all, we allowed the UN UN to come in to take into Canada, as opposed to the previous government that blocked them, to do their report, and then they issued the report, and we adopted that report. And in adopting that report, that's just not fine sentiment, but we backed it up with money. There were about $44 million in the 2018 budget. There was an additional amount of about the same amount of money in the 2019 budget that were directed right at black communities across this country. That has never been done before in the history of Canada. Second thing, we've also put in our platform, the only platform, if I'm to understand it,
You're going to have to wrap it up.
that we promise to do more to help out black community, racialized communities, to making sure that that Canada is a reflection of the strength of its diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Jean-Luc Cook.
Merci tout le monde pour venir ici ce soir. Je me pardonne si nous n'avons pas parlé en français plus, mais je vais dire pardon. It has been echoed as by other parties. It has been 150 years where many of the ridings in Ottawa have been either red or blue, and it's 2019, and yes, there is climate change, and yes, there is enormous wealth disparity, and yes, there are many, many other issues that are at play. I hope tonight when you see all these candidates, you look for the ones in your riding and you challenge them as thoroughly as we were challenged here tonight by Adrian. And
Sarah.
And Sarah, pardon. I'm just starstruck that Adrian Harewood's here, actually. So it is 2019. It is your vote. This time more than ever, we're headed to a minority parliament, which means your vote If it is for one of the smaller parties, we'll actually have disproportionately more significance and more influence in Parliament. And if you do happen to like some of the Green Party candidates, we have a few of them here, please go and meet them. They are wonderful, wonderful individuals, and become part of the political process.
Okay, thank you.
I'll leave it there. Thank you.
And final word to Mr. Abdi.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the organizers for this event. I'm very happy to be here. What I would like to remind everybody in this room is you're going to vote October 21st. I want you to remember the government that you voted for the last 4 years. They promised you a balanced budget, you did not get it. They promised you electoral reform, you did not get it. They told you they're going to look after women, they threw 2 strong women under the bus. The reality of this government is that they will make you promises that they will not be able to keep. Just a couple of days ago, maybe about a week ago, they went to Toronto to launch their safety and security. There are young people who've been dying in our communities for the last 4 years they've been in government. The only time they took opportunity to be able to talk about gun violence and bringing some attention to this issue is because there's an election. I've been doing this for the last 15 years. I've been involved in this community for the last 30 years. I want to make sure we have a safe, secure community. I want to make sure we lower your taxes. I'm looking for prosperity. I want to make sure that our community is considered one of the most vibrant, one of the brightest communities, and the reason why I'm putting my name in this election is because in this city of Ottawa right now, if there's a person of my color, I'm the only one, not including Gatineau, not including Quebec. I'm the only person running because I believe in our community and I believe in our people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the candidates. We did get a fistful of questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to all of them. Some of them were already answered in some of the questions that were asked. However, there are many candidates from the different parties in the room. Alors, si vous voulez vraiment en savoir plus sur les plateformes des différents partis, il y a des représentants qui sont ici. Je vais vous les nommer. I'll give you their names so you can go look for them. Anita Vandenbeld, Liberal Party. And just give a wave so people know who you are. Jackie Weens of the NDP. From the Green Party, you heard John-Luc Cook. Angela Keller-Herzog, Ottawa Centre, she's here. Oriana Gabirano, Ottawa Vanier, she's here. So those are the 3 Green Party. Liberal Party, other than Anita Vandenbeld, Chandra Arya, Mona Fortier, you heard Greg Forgas. For the NDP, you heard Angela McEwen, but we also have Stéphanie Mercier, we have Zaf Ansari, and for the Conservative Party, we have Mr. Abdi. For the People's Party of Canada, you heard Alain Moussende, but we also have Roger Saint-Fleur from Orleans, Mary-Lise Sevilla, Ottawa Centre, Serge Gevorkian, and Paul Dunst. Yes, so whatever party you're interested in, if you have pointed questions to ask them, si vous avez des questions à leur poser, nous vous invitons à aller les voir après la clôture de la séance.
Very quickly, just a point of order. Mr. Abdi has one thing to say. I think he wants to just issue a clarification.
Yeah, 100% clarification. I'll take this. I sincerely apologize to the other people who are in this room who are running in Ottawa that look like me. I know there's some of you here from all parties. I completely take that back. My apologies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Abdi, for that. Well, I think that brings us to the end, of the session, and I'm going to turn it over to Richard. But really, I think we should offer our candidates a round of applause. Angela McEwen, Dr. Alain Moussende, Greg Fergus, Jean-Luc Cook, and Abdul Abdi. Thank you very much for a very spirited discussion. And I'm just going to turn it over to Richard Sharp. And also, I think we owe, just one moment, please. One moment. Just one second. I think we owe a tremendous amount of gratitude to all of those volunteers, because they are volunteers who came together to put this session together. So thank you for all of your work. The volunteers who put this together, thank you.